collectively, we have to solve this task. We have to complete this task, and something's going wrong. And if they're scared to go to that person because they're going to just flip out on them and not bring a solution to the table, they're going to not go to that person, and they're going to internalize that breakdown. And then guess what? It's going to get bigger.
Welcome to The Perspective. This is episode 3 now. We're going to dive into self-worth and value and a little bit of mental health stuff. My co-host Mitch Harley here is going to take the wheel and kind of kick the ball off and get things rolling. You just recently read an article about this. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, so I kind of broke it into a few different sections because when I copy and pasted it so that I could go through it, it turned into like 18 pages. And I didn't really feel like going through 18 pages because it really went in depth. But I thought applying it to business itself, one of the things it talked about was the acceptance of failure. And what is failure? What is others' perspective of failure? Are we projecting that on ourselves? How are we dealing with it? And that actually can diminish or increase your self-worth and how you view yourself. Because there's a difference between self-confidence, self-worth, self-value. Yes, it all comes down into a similar field, but you can actually break it down into those categories. But when it came to failure, I started digging into different styles of management of failure. And one of the things that came up was goaltending in sports. And I'm a goalie myself. I understand this very well. And there's this common saying that goalies are weird. And it's true. They're different because they're hardwired differently. You're not jumping away from something coming at you. You're lunging at it.
You're almost forced to be in the line of fire constantly.
And that's a hard one. Some people can't overcome it. And they can't not flinch at something being fired at them, whether that we're talking soccer, hockey, whatever the sport is. It's such an interesting dynamic of a position. Now, the other thing to consider that this article kind of blew up, and I love that it brought this out, that the premise of those sports is on your failure. Because without scoring, there's no winning. And without scoring, there is no cheering, there's no ticket sales, there is no sport. So you have a group of people now that are dependent on your failure. But when you fail, you're punished. Your coaches are let down. Your team is let down. Your fans are let down. Your family's let down, and maybe not intentionally, but let's call a spade here. When you let in that goal, 50% of the people are let down because that was you. Maybe your team played horrible in front of you, but you let that in as a goalie.
Right.
But it's gotten to the point now where, especially in the NHL, they are so pro scoring that they've started shrinking the protective gear. And now they're talking about increasing net size because they want more scoring, which means as a goalie, more failure. So, I mean, we could talk about why goalies are put under this pressure all day long, but bringing it back to handling that, there is a science, there is an understanding and a method to handling that failure. And goalies who can't accept that failure and turn it into a method of growth, they drop out. They never make it to the NHL or even close to it, like, minor leagues. It's too hard on them mentally.
Yeah. It's tough to be in the line of fire, and when you're playing in any game, having a diverse gameplay style is so important. I used to play basketball a lot. I think about no single team is 100% on the offense. No single team is 100% on the defense. And if you have a disparity between the balance between those two things, you start to see the team fall apart. you start to see the other team or the opposing team take advantage of, that perceived weakness, and whether it's your defense or your offense. I have a school of thought that I think has helped me get through challenges like that. I think about fail fast, fail frequent, fail forward. What that means to me is get to that failure as fast as possible. Like when you start something new, or when you're doing something you normally do, or whatever it is, get to that failure as fast as possible. What that's going to show you is where you need to improve, right? So then you can work on that. That frame of mind gives you an opportunity, rather than looking at the failure as something bad, because it's not good or bad, it just is. So you get to assign how you react to that, right? So you fail fast, you get to that thing, you figure out what it is you need to work on, and you start working on that. That's how you overcome it. The next thing, fail frequent, means do that often, because you're going to find ways to improve and new opportunities way more. And being in an abundance of opportunity means an abundance of growth, means a plethora of what you get as far as reaping rewards for that. But the fail forward is the most important part of that. If you're not actually taking the action to work on that thing that you're failing at, you're not going to get anywhere. So if you're not failing forward, or you're letting that failure hold you in place, there's no room for improvement. And a lot of that comes from, I think, just the frame, the lens by which you see the world. I had a conversation actually this morning with somebody who was like, when an artist shares something, your reaction shouldn't be some level of critique. That's just being shitty. Instead of constructive criticism. And I was like, that to me doesn't make any sense whatsoever, because all criticism is constructive criticism. It just depends on how you choose to interpret it. You have no bearing or control over other people's actions. There's not a single human being on this earth that has a superpower of controlling other human beings. Sure, we can be manipulative, or we can influence or have some kind of sway on that kind of thing, but when you're going out in the world constantly trying to make sure that everybody acts the way that you want them to act inside of your little bubble, you're at a disadvantage. Versus if all criticism is constructive criticism, I get to take whatever piece of information comes from that person, solicited or not, and I get to use that to improve myself as a creator. And I think that applies to anything that we do, whether that's being creative, playing sports, running, or starting a business. Somebody somewhere is going to offer you something from their point of view. And if they think it's impossible, they're going to tell you that it's impossible. I would assert that it'd be really beneficial for you to surround yourself with people who don't think like that, people who think like anything's possible. Yes, you can do that. You just need to meet the right people, or find the right investment, or find the right opportunity for that market, or whatever it is. And then you can improve. Then something bigger and better comes out of it. But I don't know, what does that translate to you? How do you hear that from somebody else?
So going back to that article, it makes an interesting point that I thought was very applicable in any of our life. It said one of the things, because lots of people act out when they don't get the achieved result, or they fail. For example, a goalie smashes a stick. I had to start buying expensive sticks because I was breaking them so often. That's how I controlled myself from acting out like that. But what he said was, when they get scored on, what he trains his clients to do is don't move. That puck went past you, don't move. Look at where it went. Why did it get past you? And make that small adjustment that would have prevented it. And that'll show you, okay, next time I'm not going to have that little gap. I'm not going to have, I'm not going to be that little bit out of position, because very rarely is a goalie sitting in the bleachers. He's trying, he's out there. So in business, it's when something doesn't go right, or we have some sort of failure, it's not because there wasn't an effort. It's not because you have a bad plan. It's just a technical breakdown. That's it. And so rather than throw your hands up, get mad, throw a tantrum, blame other people, blame people that maybe are part of the company, blame customers. Look at the small little technical breakdown that happened and just make that adjustment. And now you don't have to have that problem. Now the problems are going to be different. You can take them on one at a time rather than them piling up and you get pulled, and you got to close the company down. So, especially as people starting up businesses, when you don't have a business that is fluid and running with all these moving parts and really constant motion, there's going to be little breakdowns. So if you're going to act out as an owner or as a manager because of every little breakdown, you will go crazy. And
how does that help, right? Like, that's the big question I ask myself, is the way that I'm reacting to anything, how is it helping?
So it's funny you say that because everyone's critical, right? We talked about criticism a minute ago. Some people feel that by displaying large emotion in that way is projecting care. So when you freak out about something, you're demanding and stomping your feet, and you're explaining to people through that body language that you care so much about this.
Right.
But that's not always productive, right? People know you own the business. If you didn't care, that would be very alarming. Everyone assumes that you care about your job and your business. So acting out and blaming others, shouting, being that just really jerk boss, that's not telling people you care about your business. That's telling them that you don't care about the other efforts. Because a business, those technical breakdowns have involved a whole bunch of different things. That's not just you not waking up at 8:00. That's, maybe somebody typing in something wrong, somebody not being aware of all of the computer aspects or, the different setups that you have in your business. It could have been just a little lack of training. So that technical improvement could be just investing a little bit of time to help somebody improve their role. But if you kick and stomp and scream at them, that's not improving a technical breakdown. That's just exposing a weakness.
Right. And leaving yourself more vulnerable to the people that are more tuned into that. The idea of, like, IQ, right? Intelligence quotient. Well, there's this other new concept that I've, kind of recently discovered called EQ, which is emotional quotient. So your emotional quotient is, how good are you at dealing with things, and how effective is the way that you deal with things. A lot of this comes from our programming. When we're born, we're born with very, very basic instincts. And as we grow old, we look to the models around us to create a personality and to form the tools that we use to deal with things. And, if you're in an environment where your dad is the authority in the house and he's always yelling, constantly aggravated and negative and whatever, and stressed out and all this other stuff, well, that kind of becomes your normal. And then you take that and translate it into the other interactions that you have in your life. And so being so vulnerable to those emotional ups and downs, and then allowing them to kind of spill over, so in some cases it's effective. In some situations it works, but I would argue that other methods or other strategies would work better to get you the result. Like I don't know, I did construction for a good part of my early career life, and I had this one boss that yelled at everything. Just, it didn't matter what was going on. He was always yelling at shit. And one day, this was kind of my last day on site. He got upset with me because I didn't do a thing that he didn't tell me I was supposed to do. He just assumed that I knew I was supposed to do this thing. And I was operating under the supervision of somebody else, and me and that person were doing the job that was assigned to him. So like this other thing was completely like not even on my radar. He got so angry with me that he threw a shovel across the pit and like messed up my shin. I just kind of stood there and I was like, I can't believe that a grown man in a position of authority managing a group of people was that immature to be able to handle a situation like this. And it comes now back to this idea that it doesn't matter what goes on, good or bad, it's your fault. If you're running a company and your sales guy is being a dick to everybody else, that's on you. You hired the bad guy. Now it's up to you to fire the bad guy. Just like if something was happening, during the day and an email was supposed to get sent out, but you failed to communicate that with the person, but that person should have known, well, that's still on you, right? And so this idea of like radical acceptance of responsibility. Gary Vee talks about this a lot, and I follow him like a religion. There's a lot of things that he shares, in all of his talks and different seminars and things like that. But one of the huge principles that he passed on to me was no matter what, if you're the guy that started the company, you're the guy that had this idea, like it's up to you to make sure that everything works well. And when it stops working or it breaks, that's your job to fix. And that, may be a failure. It may be a catastrophic failure, but it's up to you to handle it. Tony Robbins is really amazing for this. One of the things he said to me was the first time he ever started a business, some stuff went wrong, and he ended up in a lawsuit for like $5 million or something. And all of the things that happened to him in his life that led up to that point put him in the position to have to deal with a $5 million lawsuit, which some may, initially I was like, Jesus, that's a lot. The stress level is ridiculous. But he was like, no, that $5 million lawsuit was nothing to me because I've been trading hundreds of millions of dollars with multiple businesses. And so I was put in that position to handle a $5 million lawsuit. And if you don't work your way up to that, if you don't develop the skills that it takes to deal with those levels of pressure, you're never going to get there. So a lot of people, with these high aspirations and big goals, like to talk a big game and say, oh, I want to be a millionaire. Well, can you handle $1 million problems? If you can't handle $100 problem right now with your budgeting and sorting out your bills, you probably can't handle $1 million lawsuit problem either. And so it comes down to the way that you implement your models, the way that you act, the way that you interact with people, the relationships that you build, and how you deal with those the emotional ups and downs, I think is such a huge part of what makes somebody successful in business.
Well, you need it if you're going to have a team work for you. There's going to be breakdowns. Mm-hmm. That's just a fact. That's a fact of life. Whether we're talking sports, whether we're talking business, people have off days. They have breakdowns. It's okay. But as the owner, or as whatever your role is in any form of leadership or management, people look to you to lead them. And the problem is so many people are put in a position of management that it's not that they can never be qualified to run people, but if they don't have the skills or they haven't been taught how to properly lead people, to me, that is a recipe for disaster, because now you have a group of people looking to this person to say, hey, collectively, we have to solve this task. We have to complete this task, and something's going wrong. And if they're scared to go to that person because they're going to just flip out on them and not bring a solution to the table, they're going to not go to that person, and they're going to internalize that breakdown. And then guess what? It's going to get bigger. And all of a sudden now you get to a problem that just can't be resolved anymore. I've been in those situations. I've been in the situation where people were so scared to go to the boss that they would rather just leave. I've been in situations where customers were directed not to talk at a certain level if the boss was there. I've been in situations where like it could go on and on. He would throw office equipment. Like, I've been in those situations, and I told myself I would never be that person. I'm not that person to begin with. Right. But it really showed me the breakdown of, the days of the old kick and scream, get your way because you're a boss. They're done. And it's not done because, people are babies now. They're done because they realize that it's not effective. If you want a high producing team, you need the leaders to be the most acceptable, the most receptive and approachable people on the team. Leaders don't have to know all the answers. That's not what makes them a leader. It's that they produce people that get the answers. It's that they know how to make the team produce. NHL, I always go back to sport. I'm a big sports guy. Any NHL coach, some coaches are terrible coaches. And people are like, why are they so bad at coaching? They were an awesome player. Because being a player and being a coach are two completely different tasks. And sometimes some of the best coaches never played in the NHL, never played at elite professional levels. They may have played minors, but they're way better coaches, right?
Yeah.
Look at Wayne Gretzky. I love the guy. This is not a harp on Wayne Gretzky, but one of the best players of all time. He coached.
Not a great coach.
Not a great coach, right? It doesn't mean they didn't like him. It didn't mean they didn't respect him, but there were certain qualities there that he had to admit, you know what? I thought this would be different. And he went on to do other things and do them really well. But he recognized that, you know what? Maybe coaching wasn't his fit. And that's okay. And so as a leader, if you're seeing your team not following you, you have to recognize, okay, why are they not following me? Am I doing something? Do I have to make some adjustments so that they'll continue to follow me? Or do I have to bring someone else in because I'm just at that I'm not there. I'm not at the point where I can effectively lead this team, because if you're putting the team ahead of your own ego, that is that technical fix. That's fixing those little problems. But by forcing something to work that isn't there, that's a body language of kicking and screaming. And that's not putting others ahead of your own. That's not putting your business ahead of your own ego.
Right.
That's putting it at risk.
I like how you even touched on the idea of the Snowflake generation, and we had it so much harder back in the that's what happens through just the evolutionary process. We get better at these things. What I would argue is that yelling, screaming, throwing, kicking, all that nonsense, that's childish behavior. And you may be in a position of authority, and you may think that under the guise of that position of authority that you can act however you want. But saying that the people who are sensitive to that are childish or less than is not the same as your behavior, being that. If I go to the grocery store with my son and he asks me for something and he doesn't get the thing that he wants and he kicks and screams, he's still not going to get the thing he wants.
He shouldn't.
Right. Well, he shouldn't. And fortunately, our budget just makes it so that it's really easy for me to say, you know what, we just can't afford that thing. But the point still remains. So he learned very early that kicking and screaming isn't an appropriate way to work towards a solution to the problem that you have. The problem that he had being that he wanted the Snickers bar. So I think that same thing exists when we move over into the world of business, or just being emotionally intelligent in the way that we interact in the efforts of serving each other. So when a problem arises, it's really easy for us to be under stress or pressure or feel embarrassment or whatever negative emotion, but reassigning those emotions and then elevating beyond it to address the situation rather than how you feel. That's a completely different paradigm. So I think about it like this, like, this is what we know, right? This is what we know we don't know. This is what we don't know we don't know. So this little circle here of just ignorance and arrogance, thinking like, I think I know everything, or I know all that I need to know for this thing, limits the potential, or it limits your ability to actually do more. And when faced with a failure, what do? You stay inside of that circle. You don't go anywhere. So for me, it was just a series of paradigm shifts over, a decade of personal development, self-development. That was a huge thing for me. Mental health has always been a problem in my family and for myself when I was growing up. So figuring out, well, why is all this bad stuff happening to me? Well, it started with me having this victim mentality, like all these bad things are happening to me. My first shift was, instead of it happening to me, it was happening for me. And when something happens for you, what do I get out of that? So yeah, it might have sucked that I got fired from a job, or yeah, it might suck that my first business that I launched, a cleaning company, the butler did it, which by the way, amazing name. Complete and absolute failure for me, because I didn't know how to, first of all, get contracts for cleaning out. Second of all, I didn't know how to hire people to do the things. So it was just a lot of me wasting my time and not even knowing how to operate a business. And it lasted all of maybe 8 months. So I could have just, okay, in my experience, starting a business is impossible. It's only reserved for some elite imaginary group of people. So now I'm going to be a victim, and I'm going to try and win the Victim Olympics, which, newsflash, there's no award. There's no prize at the end of that. Nobody is going to come in and swoop in and save you. You have to do the things. People are willing to work with you. Like for example, you and me, when we first met, it was like, oh, I have this idea. Oh, cool. I like that idea. Let's see what we can turn it into. Right. So I'm curious to find out, like, what major paradigm shifts in your life did you have that helped you kind of open up that lens for what failure meant to you?
Man, there was a few, for sure. So many people compare failure with monetary. Right? You're not making any money at this, so you failed. Only if the goal was to be rich. Was the goal, for example, with this? What's our goal? I'm not getting paid to come record this with you, right? What's the goal? Well, the goal is to reach out to people and help them, maybe encourage them. Even if this podcast helps one person, is that a success? I think so, right? I'm not doing this to watch the follower count hit 1 million. Would it be cool? Yeah, but that's not the goal for me on this. And that started back. There was some periods of time where, yeah, the monetary income was the success gauge. It changed later on, though. Something really cool that I learned, and if anyone ever has the opportunity to do this, it's really neat. It's called the Culture Index, and those that know it will know exactly what I'm talking about. But something within that, there's this chart of from 1 to 10. And in that chart, it talks about how you receive information. So if you're a 10, then you perceive information through your mind. You're basically a robot. That's my definition of that person. If you're a 1, if you're a 1, you perceive everything through your heart, which people say, oh, that's good. Yeah, it's not always good, because anything below 1 is medical, right? So being a 1 means that if I told you, say you produced a song and I told you something about it, as a 1, you take that new information and you're defensive and you don't like it. And it's heart-wrenching, and you're a bad person, and you're accusing me of failure. When I wasn't. I was just making an observation. But it takes you a few days, and then after a while, it's like, oh, this, and then it's your idea, and then you do it, and then you're all pumped up about it, because everything's about emotion, right? Now, when I did this, I come in at a 6, which means I could talk to someone who's a 1, and I can talk to someone who's a 10, and I can relate to both of them. It's kind of a neat middle ground to be. But when I did that and I studied it and I learned what it meant and what all of those levels meant, realized that failure is relative, because what people perceive as failure is what they've set. It's not about a universal bar out there. Now, yes, we all have to make an income. Yes, we all have bills to pay. So if you can't pay those bills, was it a failure of company? Was it a failure of you? It might have been just bad timing for that company. Look how many good products are out there that never hit the market. It was just timing. Look at companies that didn't do anything till years later because the market was just timing. Does that mean it was a failure? No, right? There was circumstances outside of their control. So failure in business, I think, is very misunderstood or misinterpreted. And so for me, failure is relative. There's certain things that I don't view myself that I failed at. I may have not succeeded to what maybe I wanted to, but what other people would say, oh, he failed at that, or he didn't achieve anything at that. I don't necessarily agree. I don't really think I failed at anything in my life. I may have not got it to where I wanted it to be. Maybe I didn't reach certain goals, But because you take that and you turn around, and you build on it, I don't view anything as a failure that I've done. Whereas some people, if they don't achieve their goal, they failed, they quit, they stop, and they start over. Well, that's moving backwards.
Right.
That's not building.
There's a lot of different metrics to what success is, right? Sure, monetary is one of the metrics, like making lots of money when I start my business. That's one of them. Another one is, how many people did I help? Right? That's a really good measurement. If you help one person, okay, we succeeded. We checked that box off. What was your goal? What did you set out? Well, I wanted to help 100 people, right? Let's reverse engineer. I wanted to make $10,000. I have $1,000 product and I can help 10 people with it. So, and then, okay, so how do I get 10 people? Okay, so I have to actually do this. I have to call, I have to email, I have to text people, message, whatever. Okay, cool. So I messaged 10 people today. Success. Not all 10 of them became my clients though. So I could be, I failed. That's not helping. Okay, so let's do that again tomorrow. What did I do wrong? Where's the, misconnection? Maybe the way I said what I said needed to be changed or whatever it is. And then having the patience to execute on that, which kind of begs the question, and it harkens back to the last podcast we had, why so little people do this? Why so little, a fraction of our population is brave enough to start a business and fail repeatedly at things until they reach that mark and setting those things. And the crazy thing is you, whoever it is that's listening, watching, whatever, you get to set that goal. Nobody else does. You see what I mean? I see the world this way. This is the way that I see the world. And weirdly, I assume that everybody else sees the world that way.
Well, don't.
So if all of a sudden I just like elevated my knowledge about marketing, it was just in the back of my head, like, okay, well, now I finally caught up to everybody about marketing. And so now when I talk about it, I still feel like, I'm really intimidated by other people. And then I start saying the things and it goes like way over their head and they don't understand. And I'm like, oh shit, I got to dumb it down again back to where I was 10 years ago when I started this thing to try and figure out where did I lose you in all of that, right? And so setting those benchmarks and aiming for them and then, adjusting course as you go, that's part of the process. And so in order to be here and do these things, you kind of have to love that part of it. You have to love failing over and over and over again and improving yourself as a result of it.
So if we're going to define failing for the sake of this conversation as not hitting your goal, let's just call that failure at this point.
Yeah.
I think people have a too large of a definition in their mind of what failure is and the results of failure. Because like we talked about earlier, why don't people start their own business? They might have a plan, they might have something, but they're scared of failing. Well, okay, but you're going to fail at something. You're going to fall short. What failure are you scared of? Are you scared of not hitting your monthly target? Is that what you're scared of? Are you scared of the business going under? Because those are two completely different failures. Right. But people, they lump that all in. One failure is all failure. And that's not. Right. Not hitting a target, that's a minor failure. I don't even count that as a failure, but by definition, I guess it technically is. But they're scared that those many failures automatically mean their entire failure. Their failure as a person, their failure as somebody that has to support their family. That's what they're scared of failing at. But that's like somebody not getting in a car because somebody got into an accident. Right? That's because that's a risk that you take when you get in a vehicle, that there's going to be an accident. And at some point, you might get into a fender bender. I've been into some fender benders. Does that mean I'm scared of getting in a car because I failed at that one point? No, you're not going to stop driving. So it's the same with taking a career in your own hands. And if you want to work for somebody else, you work for a big company, that's fine. We can apply this to that too. Are you scared of saying, you know what, I'd like a bigger role, or I would like to ask for a raise, and however that comes about? But people sometimes don't, because what if they say no? What if I take it on and I can't fulfill those duties? What if I fail? And it's like, okay, well then you're going to be then just accept that by not taking action, you're going to sit where you are, and you better not be miserable for it, because it's your decision to stay there. Don't be miserable because somebody else went and started a business and you wanted to do it because you failed to act. That's your failure. And that's a failure that's real, and that I will call a failure, is not acting. Don't be mad because you didn't act. That's on you. And some people are content. If you're content and you're happy and you go home and you're totally satisfied with where you're at, that's fine. To me, that's the goal.
Right? Isn't that the purpose of all of it? It's just to find some peace and happiness in our experience as a human being on this earth.
You want to be a chef. You want to work at a fast food restaurant because it supports a hobby that you have, and you have no aspirations to be more than that, but you just want to have a part-time shift, whatever it is, that's okay. That could be considered a measure of success because you've achieved what you want. Now, is everybody viewing that as their bar? No, but I'm not going to view them as a failure because of where they work, because maybe they have hit their success. Maybe they came from somewhere where getting a job wasn't even an option. Maybe they were homeless. Maybe they had a drug problem, whatever their background was. For them, even finding a job to support them is a success, right? That's not a failure.
Yeah. I am reminded of, my girlfriend. So she came from very, very humble beginnings. We'll just put it like that. Very unstable childhood, and her only goal was to not live like that. Have a stable job, a nice safe place to live, and have kids and be content with that, because it was 1,000 times better than the predicament that she was in when she was growing up. And it's so crazy because we have these kinds of talks a lot. And one of the things that she said, well, I've reached my goal. I succeeded at creating a stable life. I have a good job. My kids are happy. My house is nice and safe. I have you, whatever. I'm kind of lost now. I don't know what to do with myself, with my life, I don't know what I like. I don't know. And so she has this weird existential crisis of like, I don't know what to do now, because, that contentment, it's an environment to breed displeasure. Staying in that place for too long, you just kind of become accustomed to it. It gets boring. It becomes the same thing over and over again, that repetitive nature. And so I challenged her to challenge herself, to try new things, experience new things. And there's been a number of things that she embarked on. And I was like, yeah, go for it. Go get it. You got this. And then like a week or 2 weeks later, she's like, I don't like that thing. And that's not a failure. That's a success, because you just figured out something you don't like. So when you're walking down the grocery aisle, you don't know what you want to pick out, but you know what you don't like. So you don't pick up the things you don't like. And that leaves room in your attention for the other opportunities to try things that you don't know whether you like or you don't like, or to get the things that you do like. And I think that that's such a powerful lesson to just apply to, this whole, just the ether of what it means to fail, what that is.
I'll say this in kind of, closing comments for me is, social media, what do? We love to watch videos of fails, right? This fail compilation that comes out every so often: skateboarding, rollerblading, people jumping off houses and into ridiculous situations. And some of them deserve to get hurt. Let's be honest, the decisions they make for the sake of that. But, let's take the skateboarding, for example. All the fail videos where guys are just landing on rails and it's like they're never going to have kids. Like, there's some rough landings. But if you take it out of context of that 2 seconds that you see them crashing, most of those guys are better skateboarders than you'll ever be, I'll ever be, right? That was them attempting something. And I'm not talking about the guys that are jumping off a house onto a table. We're guys in a skate park, guys doing parkour, and they've attempted something, and they missed the mark. So by social media's definition, they failed, and they might have hurt, broke a leg, done something. But there's also videos of those same guys winning and succeeding. and doing some really cool stuff. But there were about 500 of those little fail clips that led up to that. And so what's the lesson? Well, if they hadn't attempted it, maybe they didn't succeed the first time. But if they hadn't kept working on it and tweaking and getting a little better, they wouldn't have had that really cool end game at the end.
Right.
And so, taking it back to sports, every NHL goalie gets scored on almost every game. It's celebrated when there's a shutout. Skateboarders, they fall an incredible amount of times before they do an X Games, level trick that we all celebrate, but we love to poke fun at the fails, or what we consider the fails. They should consider it just growing pains. And in business, there's only so much money to go around. So the goal in business is, how do I take advantage of the amount of money that I have access to, or that my consumers have access to? How do I build my revenue for my business? And you know what? There's going to be days where you miss the mark. There's going to be days where you go home and you say, okay, we got to pick ourselves up. We got to keep going. But those are the businesses. Those are the people that will succeed. They will have that X Games at the end of the tunnel. But the guys that quit early, those are the guys that are just going to stay a social media fail. They're going to stay a statistic. They're going to stay somebody that, didn't go that extra mile. So that's up to you. It's a decision in your hands regardless. But not everything in your life is a failure if you don't want it to be. It's on perspective, and it's on internalizing and how you react to those situations that you're confronted with.
Beautiful. For anybody that's listening, make sure you like, subscribe, follow wherever you found this. Reach out to Mitch or myself if you need help in any way. We're here for you, and we will see you in the next episode.